Welcome to Insights. I'm Adam Rivers.
And I'm Sarah Collins. In this episode, we'll reflect carefully on the Quran verse by verse, focusing on wording, context, and coherence.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you are joining us for the first time, this show is really dedicated to just slowing down. We bypass the rapid-fire superficiality of modern media to unpack profound ancient wisdom.
All right, taking our time with it.
Exactly, examining it piece by piece to extract the practical, everyday meaning hidden within its architecture. And, to fully grasp what we are exploring today, we really must connect it to the stunning paradigm shift we examined in our previous reflection.
Oh, that was a massive shift.
It really was. We were analyzing that staggering moment where the creator taught the first human all the names. Which, that wasn't just a vocabulary lesson. It established the breathtaking reality that humanity was endowed with a unique, almost unfathomable capacity for conceptual thought.
Right, for high-level abstraction.
Yeah, and for complex language. We were granted the cognitive architecture required to categorize the universe, manipulate variables in our minds, and ultimately to build civilizations. So today we are analyzing the direct, immediate fallout of that moment.
The aftermath. Yeah.
Right, we are examining the cosmic reaction to this sudden, overwhelming revelation of human potential.
Yeah, so imagine being a creature of pure, flawless logic. You exist in the highest realms, you have literally never made a mistake, and your understanding of your purpose is just absolute.
Okay, painting a picture here.
Right. Then suddenly, you are confronted with a scenario that completely shatters your paradigm. You are presented with a problem that exposes the absolute undeniable limits of your own mind.
Wow.
So what do? Do you double down and defend your previous assumptions to protect your ego? Or do you surrender entirely to a higher truth? The verse we are examining today captures that exact reaction.
And which verse are we looking at?
It is from chapter 2, verse 32 of the Qur'an. The English translation reads, "They said, 'Glory be to you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. Indeed, it is you who is the all-knowing, the all-wise.'"
That is just such a powerful statement.
It really is. And to truly understand the weight of that declaration, we must analyze the grand cosmic environment the revelation constructs here.
Right, because this isn't just a historical anecdote.
No, not at all. It's not a mythological story of the ancient past. What we're observing is the establishment of a foundational philosophical constitution.
Okay, a constitution.
Yeah, one that governs the absolute boundaries of the conscious mind in relation to the divine. And this constitution begins with a single, highly specific word, qalu, which translates as "they said."
The plural form there feels critical. It implies a collective, unified voice rather than like a fragmented debate. But why is their unanimity so important in this specific context?
Well, the plural represents a flawless, unanimous consensus among the angels, which tells us something profound about their nature. We must remember the psychological makeup of the beings speaking here.
Right.
These are entities described as being created from pure light. They do not possess the biological hardware that drives human bias.
So no biology to get in the way.
Exactly. They have no amygdala driving fear-based territoriality, no dopamine receptors driving greedy self-interest, and definitely no fragile ego that requires constant validation.
That sounds peaceful.
Right. Therefore, their consensus is not like human political consensus, which is, usually just a fragile compromise of competing selfish interests. Their consensus is the result of pure, unclouded recognition of truth.
Because previously they had questioned the logic of placing a human deputy on Earth.
Yeah, they foresaw the potential for ecological destruction and bloodshed. So in response, they were subjected to a divine test.
The naming test.
Exactly. They were challenged to name the underlying realities of the universe if they truly believed their static functional nature made them more deserving of earthly stewardship than this new dynamic human creature.
When you frame it as an exposure of their limitations, it brings up a deeply uncomfortable mirror for our own lives.
Oh, absolutely.
When our personal limitations are laid bare, like when we realize our political ideology is flawed or our understanding of a relationship was completely wrong, our instinct is rarely to admit it gracefully. We usually build defensive walls.
We get extremely defensive.
Right. We attack the person pointing out our flaw. So how do beings of pure logic, completely devoid of that defensive instinct, actually begin their response when they realize they have failed the test?
Well, we have to analyze the mechanical cognitive function of their very first word, Subhanaka, which is commonly translated as "glory be to you."
Okay.
If we simply read the English word glory, We miss the entire cognitive process happening beneath the surface. To understand it, we really must dissect the ancient Arabic root of this word.
Which is comprised of what?
It's comprised of 3 letters, sin, ba, and ha. In classical Arabic, before it was ever used as a theological term, this root described a very specific physical action.
A physical action.
Yeah, it meant swimming rapidly or floating, and more specifically, moving something incredibly far away. It is the exact same linguistic root used in the Qur'an to describe massive celestial bodies, like stars and planets, gliding and...
Wait, celestial bodies, you were talking about physical space. How does a word rooted in physical distance, like a planet's orbit or swimming through water, have anything to do with the purely cognitive, spiritual act of praising the Creator?
That is the brilliant mechanism behind that linguistic evolution. Saying Subhanaka requires a massive cognitive abstraction.
Okay, I'm following.
It takes that concrete physical idea of vast spatial distance, like the terrifying void between 2 galaxies, and applies it intellectually to the divine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By declaring this word, you are conceptually distancing the Creator from any conceivable flaw, from any hint of absurdity, and from any possibility of a mistaken judgment.
I see. So in this exact moment, the angels are actively distancing God from the sheer absurdity of creating humanity without a profound, overarching purpose.
Perfectly said. Even though their logical minds clearly foresee that humans will likely spread corruption and shed blood, they use this word to declare, you are infinitely far removed from making a meaningless, chaotic decision.
So it is not just a passive compliment at all.
Not even a little bit.
It is a highly active intellectual recalibration. They are forcefully pushing away their own previous doubts and establishing a baseline of divine perfection before they even address their own failure.
Yes, a profound intellectual recalibration. And, contrast this deeply cognitive process with the way glorification is frequently practiced in modern religious settings.
You mean just going through the motions?
Exactly. You often see a mechanical, unthinking turning of prayer beads or the mindless chanting of phrases. A person's tongue might be repeating glory to God, yet their mind remains entirely consumed with arrogance, prejudice, and a false sense of tribal superiority. The revelation is demonstrating here that true glorification is impossible without an accompanying state of deep, agonizing intellectual humility.
But distancing God from a flaw doesn't automatically mean the angels understand the plan. They have established that the Creator hasn't made a mistake, but they still don't know why humans are here.
Sure.
They are still faced with an unresolved variable. So how do beings of pure logic cope with a sudden, overwhelming void in their understanding?
They cope by completely dismantling the illusion of independent knowledge. They follow their glorification by declaring, La ilma lana, which translates to, we have no knowledge.
Okay.
And the grammatical structure the revelation employs here is breathtaking. It utilizes what Arabic linguists call the law of absolute negation.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning this is not the equivalent of a student saying, I don't know the answer to this math problem. It is a mathematical zeroing out of an entire category of existence. They are not merely admitting a temporary gap in data. They are categorically denying the possession of any independent, self-sourced knowledge whatsoever. They are declaring absolute structural cognitive bankruptcy at their very core.
Wait, I have to push back on that just a bit.
Sure, go ahead.
When you suggest that claiming independent knowledge is inherently arrogant, isn't that a bit overly dismissive of the human experience? Humanity has mapped the human genome, we have split the atom, we have built quantum computers.
That's true.
We do possess knowledge, and we acquired it through rigorous scientific method. It is not just baseless ego, it is observable, measurable success. Why does the revelation demand this posture of absolute cognitive bankruptcy when our human minds clearly achieve incredible, tangible things?
That is the critical distinction we need to make, and it is the exact trap the human ego falls into.
Okay.
There is a monumental philosophical difference between discovering the mechanics of a pre-existing system and actually originating the knowledge of that system.
Okay, I think I see where you're going.
When a geneticist maps the human genome, they are not inventing the genetic code. They are merely learning to read a highly complex language that was already written into the fabric of the universe billions of years before they were born.
Right.
The human mind is brilliant at discovering, manipulating, and categorizing existing data. But we conflate our ability to uncover knowledge with the ability to originate it.
And the angels understand this distinction perfectly.
Exactly. The angels, who exist in dimensions far beyond our physical barriers, understand this perfectly. If beings of pure light, unhindered by our dense biological limitations, admit that they cannot originate a single concept independently, the arrogance of humanity becomes glaringly obvious.
Because we are trapped in a tiny sliver of space and time.
Right, peering through microscopes and telescopes, and yet we routinely claim to possess absolute, ultimate truth, dispensing entirely with the need for heavenly guidance. The angels establish that the absolute prerequisite for wisdom is acknowledging that you are a receiver of knowledge, not its ultimate source.
You know, I am thinking about how algorithms work in machine learning. You can have an incredibly sophisticated AI that can process billions of data points, recognize patterns invisible to humans, and generate stunning outputs.
Yeah, great analogy.
But at the foundational level, that AI must operate within the parameters of an architecture it did not build. It cannot step outside its own code to generate an entirely new reality. It seems the angels are acknowledging their foundational code. How do they articulate the boundary between their bankruptcy and the data they actually possess?
They establish that boundary with the very next phrase, ilama alamtana, meaning, accept what you have taught us.
Okay.
From the perspective of the Quran, all true knowledge is entirely a divine bestowal. It is never an inherent right, and it is never generated out of nothing by the creature.
But there's a difference in the type of knowledge, right?
Yes, we must understand the difference in the type of knowledge bestowed. The angels possess a very specific, highly focused type of knowledge. It is direct, purely functional, and perfectly tailored for their specific cosmic duties.
Like maintaining the orbits of stars.
Exactly, or executing divine commands. It is rigid and flawless.
Which is fundamentally different from the human cognitive experience. The knowledge taught to Adam wasn't just a functional operating manual for surviving in the jungle.
No, not at all. The human cognitive architecture is vastly different. Humanity's knowledge is built on the capacity for endless abstraction.
Right.
We have the ability to observe a physical object, abstract its properties, assign it a conceptual name, and then manipulate that concept in our minds to invent something entirely new.
Which is the knowledge required to settle, cultivate, and develop the earth.
Exactly. The methods of operation between humans and angels are vastly different. But this verse serves as a profound equalizer. It strips away the illusion of true independence for both species.
Wow.
Whether it is the rigid, flawless, functional knowledge of the angels or the expansive, creative, abstract knowledge of humanity, both systems draw from the exact same well. Both rely entirely at every millisecond of their existence on the first teacher.
So if we follow that logic to its conclusion, if we truly internalize that our capacity to know anything is a bestowed gift, how does that completely dismantle the way human societies traditionally construct their belief systems? Because psychologically, we seemed terrified of cognitive bankruptcy. We cling desperately to the things we believe we inherently know.
It exposes one of the most dangerous psychological traps in human history, which is the sanctification of inherited traditions.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, the human brain consumes an enormous amount of metabolic energy when it engages in critical thinking and confronts the unknown. It is biologically cheaper and socially safer to simply accept what the tribe believes.
That makes sense biologically, sure.
Right. So over time, we take ancestral customs, societal norms, and flawed human legislation, and we slowly elevate them until we treat them as absolute, unquestionable divine truths.
And the consequence of that is what?
The sociological consequence is devastating. People become so fiercely attached to these inherited frameworks that they will actually use their cultural traditions as the ultimate standard to judge the Quran itself, rather than using the revelation to judge their traditions.
Wow. They elevate flawed, historically conditioned human thought over pure divine perfection.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a form of collective cognitive dissonance. We build these intricate cages out of our ancestors' opinions, lock ourselves inside them for a sense of safety, and then violently attack anyone who suggests we step outside into the light. We call our captivity wisdom.
And the revelation categorically shatters that cage. According to the foundational constitution laid out in this verse, true knowledge can only be derived from two authentic sources.
Which are?
Brilliant, observable proof in the physical universe, or clear, undeniable revelation. Empty religious rituals, inherited mythological worldviews, and blindly following the path of our forefathers are essentially heavy chains of ignorance.
Right.
The revelation did not come to validate human tradition. It came to aggressively disrupt it, to break those chains, and to force the human mind to engage directly with the ultimate reality.
This brings us to a crucial transition. The angels have dismantled their own ego. They have admitted their absolute lack of independent origin, and they have recognized the sole source of their functional programming.
Right.
But admitting ignorance creates a massive intellectual vulnerability. What serves as the ultimate anchor for this profound surrender? How do they stabilize their minds after such a sweeping admission of bankruptcy?
They stabilize their minds by anchoring themselves to an absolute certainty. The verse concludes with a powerful, restrictive linguistic structure, innaka anta, which translates to, indeed, it is you.
Okay.
In Arabic grammar, this specific phrasing implies exclusivity. It pulls the rug of arrogance out from under any created being by restricting true, ultimate perfection exclusively to the Creator. And they immediately follow this structural exclusivity by invoking a highly specific divine name, Al-Lilim, the all-knowing. We have to unpack what omniscience actually means in this context because it is far more complex than just having a large database of facts.
Right, because human beings constantly accumulate facts, but we clearly aren't omniscient. What is the fundamental difference in the scope of Al-Alim?
Well, human knowledge is strictly linear and retrospective. We can only know what has already happened, and we only perceive tiny, isolated fragments of reality.
True.
Al-Alim denotes an absolute, simultaneous comprehension of the past, the present, and the infinitely expanding future. But the philosophical depth goes even further.
Oh, so...
True omniscience means knowing what has not happened and knowing exactly how it would play out if it did happen. It is the perfect, simultaneous knowledge of every microscopic subatomic particle alongside the massive, overarching trajectory of the entire cosmos.
Which completely reframes the angels' initial confusion about the creation of humanity. They were operating on localized data.
Yes, their confusion was the result of fragmented knowledge. The angels looked at the raw, volatile materials of human nature, our physical desires, our capacity for anger, and they correctly analyzed a part of the equation.
They accurately foresaw the potential for corruption, exploitation, and catastrophic bloodshed.
Right, but Al-Alim saw the whole. The Creator saw the eventual emergence of the prophets, the profound sacrifices of righteous individuals, the breathtaking scientific discoveries.
The spiritual elevation.
Yes, the immense spiritual elevation that human beings are capable of achieving when they conquer their own lower desires. The angels suddenly realized their logical projection was correct, but painfully incomplete, while divine knowledge is absolutely total and flawless.
I am struck by a glaring historical problem here, though. Let's assume absolute knowledge encompasses every variable in the universe. We know from our own dark history that an immense volume of knowledge does not inherently lead to a good outcome.
That is tragically true.
In the 20th century, human physicists gained the incredible deep knowledge required to unlock the power of the atom. It was a triumph of the intellect.
Yeah.
But without another stabilizing factor, we immediately use that brilliant knowledge to vaporize hundreds of thousands of civilians. If knowledge alone can be so terrifyingly destructive, why is Al-Alim sufficient to comfort the angels?
You have hit on the core tension of the human condition, and the revelation addresses it perfectly in the very next breath. Al-Alim is never left isolated. It is immediately and permanently paired with Al-Hakim, the all-wise.
Okay.
To understand the necessity of this pairing, we must look at the Arabic root of Hakim Ha, Kaf, and Mim. Linguistically, this root revolves around concepts of prevention, tightening, restraint, and putting things in their exact, proper place to prevent collapse. As your example of the atomic bomb illustrates perfectly, knowledge isolated from wisdom is a blind, terrifyingly destructive force.
Think about ecological interventions, too. We develop the chemical knowledge to create powerful pesticides that eradicate crop-destroying insects. That is impressive knowledge.
Right.
But because we lack wisdom, we don't foresee that those same chemicals will leach into the water table, decimate the bee populations required for global pollination, and ultimately threaten the entire global food supply. We knew how to kill the pest, but we lacked the wisdom to understand the vast, interconnected web of the ecosystem.
That is the perfect distinction. Knowledge is understanding the mechanism. Wisdom is understanding the consequence. Wisdom is the moral, structural, and teleological compass of knowledge.
It is the force that prevents knowledge from consuming itself.
Yes. By invoking Al-Hakim, the angels are explicitly acknowledging that the Creator's decision to place a volatile, unpredictable human creature on Earth was not some random, chaotic experiment. They are acknowledging that despite the inevitable bloodshed they foresaw, there is a profound underlying purpose. There is a precise, unbreakable cosmic balance and a flawless execution behind the decision, even if their own minds cannot immediately perceive the entire architectural blueprint.
This principle of cognitive limitation paired with the necessity of divine wisdom feels like a universal law. How does this angelic realization in the heavenly realms map onto the broader human condition as it is discussed elsewhere in the Revelation? Are we subject to the exact same cognitive boundaries?
We are bound by the exact same parameters, and the Quran makes this explicit. There is a brilliant thematic connection here to chapter 17, verse 85.
What does that verse say?
In that verse, addressing the human pursuit of understanding the nature of the soul, humanity is told directly, and you have not been given of knowledge except a little.
The symmetry is stunning.
It really is. Up in the highest, most pure realms of existence, the angels are confessing they have no knowledge except what was actively bestowed upon them. And down here on the physical earth, amidst all our universities and laboratories, humanity is being informed of the exact same fundamental reality.
It is the inescapable universal rule of humility for every single conscious being in the universe.
Absolutely.
And yet, observation of human behavior shows that we fight this universal rule tooth and nail. We organize our entire societies around the illusion that we possess the whole picture. We build economic models, political ideologies, and technological systems based on the absolute certainty of our own fragmented data.
We rebel against this limitation constantly, and the historical consequences are devastating. Look at the state of modern humanity.
Yeah.
Over the last 3 centuries, we have achieved an unprecedented technological and informational revolution. But because it was decoupled from the concept of divine bestowed wisdom, it has bred an immense toxic arrogance.
We aggressively harvested the knowledge of the physical world, but completely abandoned the wisdom required to manage it.
Exactly. Because we collectively forgot our cognitive limits, our technological hubris has directly engineered massive existential ecological crises.
Right.
It has led to horrific mechanized world wars where human beings were processed like slaughterhouse animals. And it has resulted in a deep, pervasive social alienation where we are more connected by fiber optics than ever before, yet suffering from unprecedented levels of psychological isolation.
We falsely convinced ourselves that we had mastered the mechanics of nature and therefore no longer needed the compass of heavenly guidance.
And in doing so, we essentially broke the world.
Which makes the behavior of the angels in this verse even more striking. There is a deeply profound sociological implication to their response. The angels had a genuine logical concern about human violence.
Yes.
They voiced that concern. They were then presented with new, undeniable evidence of human conceptual superiority. And upon seeing that evidence, they actually changed their minds.
Just like that.
They didn't dig their heels in. They didn't form a political action committee to suppress the evidence. How does that noble cognitive flexibility contrast with the mechanics of human ideological tribalism?
The angels established the absolutely vital intellectual concept of revision and correction. It is a masterclass in intellectual honesty.
Revision and correction.
Yeah, the angels experienced absolutely zero cognitive dissonance or shame in instantly retracting their initial position. The very millisecond they were presented with undeniable empirical proof of Adam's cognitive superiority, his unique, God-given ability to categorize and name the realities of the universe which they could not, they immediately adjusted their entire worldview.
They possessed no fragile ego that required defense.
Exactly. They simply surrendered to the friction of truth.
Contrast that with the absolute nightmare of human debates today. Whether it is a theological dispute, a political argument online, or a clash of historical narratives, the introduction of new contradictory evidence almost never causes a human being to gracefully change their mind.
No, it really does.
It usually causes them to attack the source of the evidence.
It highlights the dark reality of human sectarian fanaticism. Today, across all societies, you see individuals and massive groups violently, aggressively defending their inherited opinions, their narrow political sects, or their highly specific historical interpretations of religion.
Even when those ideas clearly and demonstrably contradict pure reason and the core liberating principles of the Qur'an.
Right. People will treat the speculative opinions of ancient scholars as if they are infallible divine edicts.
Right.
But this cosmic scene definitively teaches us that no human interpretation, no matter how revered the scholar, is flawless.
Exactly.
We are heavily burdened with the responsibility to interrogate the revelation directly, utilizing our own reasoning faculties to extract the answers required for our specific modern era. We must be as willing to abandon our flawed tribal assumptions as the angels were to abandon theirs.
The psychological mechanics of that surrender are fascinating, and I want to look closely at how the actual grammar of the verse reflects that internal state. When you read the verse in Arabic, the perspective doesn't stay static. It bounces around dramatically.
Oh, the shifting is incredible.
They begin by speaking about God, then they pivot to speaking to God, then they speak about themselves. Is there a deeper psychological meaning behind why the phrasing is structured with such volatility?
The rhetorical shifting in this verse is a masterpiece of linguistic psychology.
Yeah.
Consider the movement. It begins in the third person as a narrative fact, they said.
Right.
Then it immediately shifts to a direct, intimate second person, glory be to you. Then it abruptly shifts to the first person, turning entirely inward to admit their own existential flaw. We have no knowledge. Then it swings back to the second person, accept what you taught us. And finally, it concludes with a definitive, overarching statement of divine perfection. This constant, rapid grammatical fluctuation is not a stylistic accident. It perfectly mirrors a state of complete, overwhelming spiritual melting in the immediate presence of the divine.
Spiritual melting. That is a profoundly evocative phrase. It implies that the rigid boundaries of the self are dissolving under the weight of an overwhelming reality. It feels intensely intimate, almost frighteningly close.
It is the ultimate state of intimacy. It demonstrates that the angels are not engaging with the Creator as some dry, distant theoretical concept written in a theology textbook.
Right.
They are actively, dynamically experiencing the crushing, awe-inspiring reality of the divine presence. Their language fragments and shifts because their consciousness is being overwhelmed by majesty.
And tragically, that sense of immediate, terrifying, and beautiful presence is exactly what the vast majority of human beings have lost in the modern era.
Sadly, yes. We have reduced the profound practice of religion to a sterile, mechanical checklist of rituals, completely devoid of that awe-inspiring, dynamic, soul-melting connection. We talk about God endlessly, but rarely speak to God with that level of terrifying honesty.
If a society were to genuinely recapture that awe and deeply adopt these universal values of self-honesty, rapid course correction, and profound intellectual humility, how could this specific verse act as a practical cure for the societal arrogance we see dominating our institutions today? How does this angelic model fundamentally fix the way humans handle power, authority, and the dissemination of knowledge?
It provides the ultimate philosophical weapon for dismantling what we can accurately call cognitive tyranny.
Cognitive tyranny?
Yes. Throughout human history, and heavily prevalent today, you have individuals, clerical classes, or academic groups who aggressively attempt to monopolize the understanding of the Qur'an and the universe. They construct elaborate institutional walls and set themselves up as the exclusive, unquestionable gatekeepers of truth. They take their own heavily flawed, culturally biased, and historically conditioned human opinions, and they authoritarianly present them to the masses as unquestionable divine law.
When institutions engage in that behavior, they are directly and violently violating the core angelic principle established in this verse.
Absolutely.
The logical deduction there is devastating. If beings of pure light who are completely free of biological bias and who actually stand in the direct presence of the divine refuse to claim cognitive authority, the idea that a human being would do so is almost comical.
It's the height of absurdity. The angels, standing in the literal courts of heaven, did not dare claim infallibility, nor did they attempt to monopolize the truth.
Right.
Therefore, for human beings, creatures biologically constructed from the dust of the earth, profoundly prone to neurological error, emotional bias, and selfish ambition, to claim absolute cognitive authority over others is a grotesque overreach. The revelation is definitively an open book.
It's meant for everyone.
It is a dynamic revelation meant for every single reflecting, reasoning mind to engage with directly. It is not a locked vault designed to grant power and control to a select, elite clerical few.
Understanding this angelic submission forces us to confront a very dark alternative reality. We are watching beings of logic surrender to wisdom, but we have to ask, what if they hadn't?
That's a terrifying thought.
What if, when challenged with the absolute limits of their knowledge, they had simply refused to back down? What if they had allowed ego to override logic and insisted that their initial assessment of humanity was right regardless of the evidence?
Well, we do not need to hypothesize about that dark alternative, because the revelation provides us with the exact historical case study of a being who took that exact path.
Who was it?
Who was it that faced a remarkably similar divine test of submission, was confronted with the new reality of human existence, and explicitly chose the path of arrogance instead? It was Iblis, the entity known as Satan. When you deeply and logically unpack the rebellion of Iblis, you discover it wasn't a rebellion of chaotic madness. It was rooted entirely in a deeply flawed, materialistic logic. When ordered to acknowledge the significance of Adam, his argument was essentially scientific and elemental. He declared, "I am better than him. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay."
That is a staggering realization. He used an early form of material reductionism.
Exactly.
He looked at the elemental chemical makeup of fire, its energy, its upward movement, its luminosity, and compared it to the dense, heavy, dark nature of dirt, and used that physical data to justify a supreme racial or existential superiority.
Precisely. Iblis actually possessed a degree of valid, partial material knowledge. He accurately understood the basic physical properties and elemental differences between fire and earth. But he possessed absolutely zero wisdom.
Zero with.
He was so completely blinded by his obsession with elemental origins and material data that he entirely missed the transcendent divine spiritual breath that had been placed into humanity. He completely missed the capacity for conceptual thought and moral elevation.
Wow.
And this verse we are discussing draws the absolute unyielding dividing line for all conscious existence. On one side, you have the angelic path of faith, which is defined by deep intellectual humility, the admission of ignorance, and total submission to divine wisdom.
And on the other side?
On the exact opposite side, you have the path of disbelief, which is not necessarily a lack of facts, but is defined by Iblisian arrogance, material reductionism, and fatally flawed logic that refuses to see beyond the physical surface.
And that serves as such a terrifyingly accurate mirror for the listener today, because that Iblisian logic didn't disappear. It just changed its vocabulary.
It really did.
When human beings engaged in the transatlantic slave trade, or when 19th century scientists used the pseudoscience of phrenology to measure skull shapes to quote-unquote prove the superiority of one race over another, they were executing the exact same logical fallacy as Iblis.
Exactly the same.
They were using partial material knowledge genetics or physical traits to entirely dismiss the equal spiritual reality of another human being. It forces a brutal self-audit. As we navigate our lives, our political debates, and our social media interactions, are we embodying that angelic humility, willing to pause and say, I don't know the whole picture?
Or are we choosing the alternative?
Exactly. Are we wearing the cloak of Iblisian arrogance, stubbornly defending the superiority of our fire against someone else's clay? It is a choice we make every single day. But looking back at the specific phrasing the angels use, I notice a grammatical detail. When they say, accept what you taught us, the verb is strictly in the past tense. Does the use of the past tense imply that the transfer of knowledge was a one-time event and the learning process is now permanently closed?
That is a critical nuance to address. While the tense used by the angels is past, because they are referring to the functional programming that had already been firmly established in their minds, the reality of divine teaching is a continuous, unbroken, and infinite process.
Okay, so it doesn't just stop.
No, God's knowledge never depletes. And this has massive, urgent implications for how we interact with the Qur'an itself. A major illness in modern religious thought is treating the revelation as if it is a solid, petrified document whose depths were completely exhausted and finalized by scholars 1,000 years ago.
Right.
The Qur'an is not a static document. It is an infinitely dynamic, living blueprint. It is intricately designed by the Creator to reveal entirely new secrets, new layers of meaning, and new scientific symmetries generation after generation.
So the revelation itself doesn't change, but as human civilization advances, our capacity to extract wisdom from it should theoretically deepen.
Exactly. As human cognitive tools evolve, as our understanding of astrophysics, quantum mechanics, biology, and sociology exponentially expands, our ability to understand the profound depths and structural brilliance of the Qur'an expands alongside it.
That makes perfect sense.
If we aggressively freeze our understanding, demanding that society only accept the interpretations formulated by ancient predecessors who thought the earth was the center of the universe, we are actually committing a theological crime. We are suspending the active attribute of al-alim.
Wow.
We are behaving as if divine knowledge stopped flowing in the 12th century. Furthermore, we must understand that all divine laws are rooted in a perfect, absolute, and timeless knowledge of human nature.
So altering them is dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. When modern humans arrogantly attempt to alter or abolish those core moral laws because they feel they have outgrown them, they are directly attacking divine wisdom. But equally destructive is the conservative impulse. When we blindly dress up harmful, outdated, culturally specific human traditions in the sacred garb of religion and force them onto new generations, we distort and weaponize that divine wisdom just as violently.
We have covered an immense philosophical landscape today, traveling from the flawless, egoless consensus of the highest cosmic realms, down to the intricate mechanics of human arrogance, the dangers of tribal tradition, and the terrifying historical echoes of Ablisian logic.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It really is. So how can we synthesize this massive, complex philosophical journey into a practical, step-by-step cognitive roadmap that the listener can actually apply to their own mind today?
The architecture of this verse naturally constructs a profound four-step roadmap for the liberation and proper functioning of the human intellect. Step one is the act of purification, embodied in the word Subhanaka.
Okay, clearing the mind.
Right? This requires aggressively clearing your mind of flawed, inherited assumptions and actively distancing your concept of the Creator from any human absurdity or chaos. Step two is admitting limitation, encapsulated in La Umalana.
Acknowledging what we don't know.
Yes, this is the painful, necessary crushing of your own ego, the deliberate recognition that your personal perspective is fragmented, biased, and incomplete. Step three is identifying the source, found in Ilma Alamtana.
And that means?
This means anchoring whatever true, verified knowledge you do possess directly to the divine framework, recognizing it as a bestowed gift rather than a personal conquest. And the final step, step four, is absolute certainty declared in Inaka Anta Alalim Alakim.
Trusting the overarching design.
Precisely. This is the ultimate resting state of the mind.
Right.
Trusting perfectly in the overarching infinite knowledge and precise preventative wisdom that governs the chaos of the universe.
If a society were to actually implement those four steps, it wouldn't just be a personal religious awakening. It sounds like the formula for a complete ground-up cultural and intellectual revolution.
It is the blueprint for a total intellectual revolution. It demands a radical return to the Qur'an as the dominant, supreme, and ultimate scale by which we weigh all other incoming information, whether that is cultural tradition, political ideology, or scientific theory.
That's a heavy responsibility.
It is. We can solidify this roadmap by looking at another profound directive in the Revelation, specifically chapter 17, verse 36. That verse commands humanity directly. Do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge.
Which highlights the responsibility of our inputs.
Exactly. It explicitly highlights the profound, heavy, and terrifying responsibility of our sensory inputs, our hearing, our sight, and our heart, which is the seat of intellect. We are morally and existentially responsible for the media we consume, the traditions we blindly accept, and the ideologies we propagate. We are commanded to verify, to reflect deeply, and to absolutely never claim rigid certainty where we only possess fragile assumptions.
Thank you so much for breaking down the mechanics of that verse with such incredible depth, historical context, and relentless logic. It truly transforms how you view what initially appears to be a simple sentence of praise.
My pleasure entirely.
To summarize the massive paradigm shift we've uncovered today, admitting your own ignorance is not a humiliating weakness. It is the mandatory, non-negotiable first step to acquiring any true understanding of reality.
Absolutely.
Real glorification of the divine isn't just mindlessly repeating syllables on a string of beads. It is a highly active, agonizingly honest intellectual process of distancing God from absurdity and trusting his overarching, complex design, even when we cannot see the blueprint.
Perfectly summarized.
We are fundamentally required to approach revelation as a dynamic living force, ruthlessly stripping away the cages of inherited myths and arrogant Ablisian assumptions. We must learn to perfectly balance bold, courageous, boundary-pushing research into the physical universe with a profound, quiet, and unshakable humility.
That's the core of it all.
So I want to leave you with this final overarching thought to carry with you into the noise of your daily life. If the beings of pure light who reside in the absolute highest realms of existence and who stand in the direct presence of the divine find their greatest strength and clarity in admitting exactly what they do not know, what fragile illusions of certainty are you clinging to today that might actually be keeping you in the dark?
Well said.
That's it for this episode of Insights. If you found this reflection helpful, follow the show and join us next time as we continue verse by verse in the Qur'an. Until then, take one idea from this verse into your day.